Hey everybody, welcome back to the studio. Well, in the past video, it may not have been the one that showed last week, just depends how I put them up, but I just finished a video talking about camera problems or some of the 911 calls I get for people with problems with their cameras. And if you haven't seen it, go to the video that I did previous about 911 problems and listen to that one. But this one's going to follow up on it, and it's additional problems that I get constantly from people. Now, in the previous video, I talked about changing the lens and the camera getting lost. One of the other issues that I get constantly from people is that they've changed the lens on their camera. Everything seems to be working, but all of a sudden their lens isn't focusing. And two things that happen here. One is that sometimes people will have changed the lens from autofocus to manual focus. So let's say you go and photograph northern lights. Well, you don't want it on autofocus. So you turn it to manual focus and then you forget to put it back to autofocus. That's one of the problems. The second problem is that when people put the lens back on their camera, they don't turn it so that it clicks and then move it back just a little bit. They sometimes turn it and they don't even hear the click, or they turn it and it clicks and they give it an extra wrench. And what happens is that the contacts don't line up exactly. And I get so many people calling me going, all my pictures are out of focus. What am I going to do? This has nothing to do with a DSLR or a mirrorless. This is just a simple fact that the lens is on either manual focus when you didn't expect it to be on manual focus, or the camera and lens aren't communicating correctly. So what do? Well, obviously, if the switch is on manual focus, put it on autofocus. If you can't tell if the switch is on autofocus, if it's not completely over, I always tell people, switch it anyways. Switch it to manual focus and then back to autofocus. It could be that you moved it just a little bit. Likewise, if you're going to check that, also check your image stabilizing to make sure that that's turned on. Because again, sometimes what happens is people will move it just a little bit and then all of a sudden it's not on autofocus, it's not on image stabilize, and it's not working the way you expect it. The other way is take the lens off the camera and then just put it back on properly. Don't need to wrench it on. What I always tell people is turn it till it clicks and then just move it back just a touch. Don't wrench it back, just move it back just to make sure that it's actually locked on the camera. Not only will this make sure the lens works properly, which is a good thing, but it'll make sure that it's on the camera. So if you grab the lens, the body doesn't fall off, or if you grab the body, the lens doesn't fall off. Another big issue. So many times, my lens just isn't focusing. It worked perfectly before. Even if your lens has been on your camera for a day, a week, a month, or whatever, and it all of a sudden stops focusing, what I always tell you, as I told you in the previous video, shut the camera off, leave it off for 30 seconds or a minute, turn it back on again, then move the selector switches. Now, if you're working with a camera body that also has the manual focus ability on the body and on the lens, make sure you haven't changed one setting that's overriding another setting. This happens a lot. I have people who will turn a body to manual focus. They still have the lens on autofocus, but all of a sudden the body's not trying to autofocus and they're just lost. So make sure you haven't changed a setting and that you think that it's on the right setting and it's not. Another big issue, and this one's like another massive one. The camera is not responding like it's supposed to. It's really slow. It sort of works, then it doesn't work, and then it takes a long time. And this happens with DSLRs, mirrorless, point and shoot cameras, hybrid cameras, so many different cameras. And it all comes down to the battery. I've had people come in here with their batteries that said they were fully charged. We tried charging up the flash on their camera, the on-camera flash, and the camera shut off. You see, that's what it's doing. So we get it back on again. It says the battery's fully charged. We try charging it up. Camera shuts off again. We replace the battery, put in a new battery, one that's fully charged, one that we know that's charged, and the problem goes away. It can just be the battery, or it can be how the battery has been inserted. Again, like I said with the camera card, you can get stuff on the contacts. You can get stuff in there. Piece of sand, dirt, piece of lint, whatever, can get in and all of a sudden stop the contacts from working correctly. And on today's cameras, they're very picky. A lot of today's cameras are checking to make sure you're not using somebody else's brand of battery in their camera. And if you are, they're going to throw a temper tantrum. So if they can't see themselves, if they can't check the data back and forth, they will cause issues. And if you're trying to use a flash, all of a sudden it's drawing more power from the battery. And if the contacts are dirty, it may just reset itself and try starting all over or throw a temper tantrum. So again, like with camera cards, I always say take it out, check the contacts, blow any dust or lint or anything out of there, put the battery back in, see if that fixes it. If that doesn't fix it, I strongly recommend people have 2 batteries. Take your second battery, put it in there, see if that stops it. Recharge your batteries, see if that stops it. Now, I know if you're out on a shoot, it's kind of hard to recharge a battery while you're out shooting and the bride and groom are waiting for you. So that's why I always recommend that you carry a second battery. Just helps. Just make sure things are like working properly and that you have something to fall back on. Now, the third problem that I get a lot of times doesn't come from people that are out in the field taking pictures, but it comes afterwards. And I get a lot of people phoning me going, my pictures look horrible. And they're usually not very patient. They're usually not very calm. They're usually very upset. I'm usually taking the brunt of their anger, even though I had nothing to do with it. But they're contacting me going, they look horrible. And I go, okay, explain horrible. They're just horrible. They're just, and they just can't explain. They just look bad. They just don't understand it. They look really bad. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll ask them to send me one of their files so I can look at it. And what happens so many times is that a setting gets changed on the camera. And one of the big settings to get changed, I don't know why, but it's one of the big settings that people contact me with, is they change the file size. And I've had people absolutely guarantee me they've never touched the file size setting. They've never changed the size of the file that's being saved. Everything is supposed to be perfect. Everything should work. But guess what? It doesn't. It got changed. I've had people phone after shooting huge assignments and all their pictures were extremely low res. And what they were seeing when they opened them up on their computer was very low res files. That's why they looked horrible. So watch and check. I strongly recommend, and I mean strongly recommend, before every assignment you go through and check a few things on your camera to make sure that the settings never got changed. And the file size, the compression ratio is one of the first things I tell people to check. It's one of the big problems that I get. You can have a picture that's a little bit out of focus, and if the file's full size, large, you can run anti-sharp or sharp mask on it, and you can sharpen it up. You can clean up some color, but if you have a really low res file, you're pretty much hooped. And the final one I'm going to talk about in this video today is white balance. It's another one of these areas that gets changed a lot. And again, sometimes I actually get calls when people are shooting the pictures. I've had people phone and say, all my bride pictures, she looks like a Smurf in every picture. She's so blue. And I'll sit there and I'll listen to them and I'll say, okay, I need you to check. No, I never changed that. No, just check. I never changed that. Look, you were inside the church. Now you're outside in the sun. If she was good inside the church and now she's Smurf blue outside, check to see if you have the color balance set on something like incandescent or fluorescent. And people actually argue with me while I'm trying to explain this to them. Well, I never changed it. Why would I check it? Just change it. Just check it. A lot of times what happens is people will hit a button for some reason and they don't know that they've hit the button and they've changed something and away it goes. White balance, just like I said previous, with the file size is one of the other things that gets changed a lot. Check if your pictures are all of a sudden looking really off color to see if you by mistake change the white balance to something else. Now, I'll have people that'll tell me, well, I shoot in RAW. That's fine. If you shoot in RAW, you can adjust it afterwards. In fact, if you shoot in JPEG, you can adjust it afterwards. But I always tell people, set it up so it works correctly, just in case. I've had people shoot JPEG thinking they were shooting RAW, and they didn't worry about their white balance, and they had to fix it afterwards. Why not just make sure it works perfectly to begin with? It just saves so much editing, so much work afterwards. It just makes things so much easier. So I don't know if I'll do another video on this. I still have a bunch more to do, but I may throw this in between other videos. But these are some of the things that you should check when you go out in the field shooting, whether you shoot for yourself, whether you shoot professionally, no matter what it is. Check these things and it'll make your life so much easier. So until next time, get out there, take some great pictures. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.